Welcome to today's episode of Financial Fluency. Today I am here with Liz Lajoie, who is the author of From Zero to Zen, Secrets to Nurturing Your Numbers and Finding Financial Flow, which happens to be coming out today. Woohoo! Congratulations, Liz. I'm so excited for your book.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be at this point. It's finally done and out in the world, which is awesome and terrifying all at the same time.
That must feel so good.
It does.
And you're also the founder of Stratera Business Solutions as well. But I think because it's pub day for your book, we should talk about your book first. So tell us about both what the book's about and about this process of getting you here to today to publish day.
Okay, that's a lot. So the book is for coaches and creative professionals, people who traditionally are a little numbers averse, who are super passionate about what they're doing in their work and loving that part of it. They've gotten most of the business stuff taken care of, figured out how to do some marketing and get clients and work with them. But this one part, the financial part, is really still causing pain and hiccups. And the concept of, moving into a business environment from a financial management standpoint is overwhelming. And there are a lot of books out there for financial how-to, and a lot of them read very dryly and are hard to take in if you're not comfortable with that kind of language. So this book is really, small business financial management for the entrepreneur, the solopreneur, in small, easy to digest bites, kind of holding your hand through the basic process of thinking about how you want to use your money to really grow an amazing business.
Mm-hmm. That sounds great. And I have it right here because today is the day that we can read it. And I'm going to be reading through it and leaving a review and everything, which all of you should do. You should all go download it today. You should go leave a review after you read it. But because I haven't fully read it yet, can you talk us through some of the points? Like when people come to you or are ready for this book, where are they at in their business and life? And then where does the book, what kind of journey does it take you on?
Right. That's a great question. So I think this book is most useful for people who have probably been in business for a year or two, are finally getting the wheels kind of turning a little more smoothly in terms of figuring out what's happening. Some money's coming in. I'm a big fan of working with people with their own numbers as opposed to theoretical training and information, because it just doesn't stick. And so the book is really useful if you have some experience and have just really been struggling with how do I go from, contract to getting cash in hand? Is there a way to make that streamlined and happen as fast as possible? So the book talks about, invoice. I'm going to use words that might be a little freaky, invoicing, and, how you translate, what's your payment cycle and things like that. But also, how do you handle your expenses as a business owner? Are there ways to maximize that kind of, that piece of your business, and how you put it all together so that you can really start to understand what's happening in your business financially and use those numbers to make good decisions. A lot of people that I work with are really gun shy when it comes to this piece of their business, and they either really don't want to make a mistake, so they're feeling kind of deer in headlights, or it just is something they only look at once a year when it's tax time. We're kind of recently over the hump of tax time, and a lot of people I've been talking to have been really overwhelmed by how much they had to put in, at 2 days of finding receipts and all of that kind of stuff. So they're good best practices for staying on top of your money throughout the year as well. But also how to read financial statements. As a business owner, this becomes important, especially when you want to grow. And a lot of us who don't necessarily have a business background don't really know what a profit and loss statement is, don't know what that all means. So I go through all of that in very easy to digest layman's terms, and in a way that makes it not scary and hopefully allows people to have a better sense of what they can be doing with their money in a positive way in their business.
Mm-hmm. Do you look into tax strategies?
I work with tax professionals. I myself, my background is in small business management, so the real day-to-day operational strategic planning piece of it. So this book handles that. primarily, you know, and we often think only in terms of taxes, but the reality is there's a lot of, you know, on the boots on the ground, nuts and bolts, that if you can get that set up and streamlined in your business, can really make your life a lot easier in terms of cash flow and all of those other good things in addition to taxes.
Mm-hmm. Just before we hit record, I was getting a little private coaching real quick from Liz here. I was telling her about the situation that my husband had when we sold the equity in our ranch, and how in my head and in my net worth statement, I'd always put a certain number for what I thought that worth was. And that when I actually came to sell that, I really hadn't anticipated how much it would cost me to liquidate it, how much taxes there would be. And I know sometimes just speaking to people about selling homes, say in a divorce situation or something, like you could say, well, the value of the home, you know, oh, we're going to get 1.7 million because we built it in, you know, 1998 and it was 500,000 then, and now, you know, the property values have grown so much. So I have to say, oh, well, if there's a massive change in the property value, we need to figure out how much the tax is going to be. So not to get bogged down in taxes at all, but just sometimes there are these moments in life when we think about what we're going to have, like we have this idea of the cash that's going to be in hand after something happens, without thinking about the tax consequences and fees and lawyers or what, you know, whatever it involves, especially for real estate, things like that. If you plan out the taxes ahead of time a little, like, am I going to be putting that money back into another property, or just what's going to happen? I know that can affect these big moments, like buying or selling a business, buying or selling a house. But yes, it's true. Most of us don't deal with that day to day.
I love that you brought that up, because the one part about taxes that I think is really important for the small business owner on a regular basis is really, and the book does touch on this toward the end, is really thinking through, you know, how do you set aside money to take care of your taxes as an entrepreneur? You know, especially if you're coming from a corporate background or as an employee, you're used to all of that being taken care of for you. And all of a sudden, now you have this business, and it's easy to think just in terms of cash of, I've got, especially if you're really close to the bone when you first start your business, right? You're almost taking almost all the cash out just to pay grocery bills and your gas and your mortgage. And you can get really whammoed at tax season if you haven't set money aside. And you can even pay fines if you're making enough money and you haven't done quarterly prepayments and things like that. So that planning part of it, I think, is a really good point. And it's something that we often shy away from because nobody likes taxes. That's just a reality in our world. But it happens. And if you can plan for that piece of it, even if you're not paying it automatically, if you're squirreling away a certain percentage, it can really alleviate the stress and the strain that ends up coming when tax season hits.
I think that is a really interesting mindset adjustment too, going from employee to self-employed, because you're not used to seeing the taxes. I mean, they come out of your paycheck before you even pay them usually, and then maybe you owe something at the end of the year, but a lot of people are used to getting a refund. And as someone who's been self-employed for a long time, I've never had a refund. If I have something, I put it towards the next quarterly payment, you know, just keep moving it forward. And I know the very first time that I made enough purely from my self-employed income that I did owe fees, I was really angry at my CPA. I was like, you know, he brought up this thing, and I was like, what are these fees? Why do I owe this $150 here? And he was like, oh, that's because you weren't doing the quarterly estimated taxes. And I was like, well, why wasn't I? Like, why didn't you tell me? I didn't even know. So I was like, I never want to pay this whatever I owed them in the fees for not, or penalties for not paying it in the right time. So I think it is really important too, to, not that that is a massive amount, but if you add up a number of $100 penalties and fees across different areas of your business, that does really add up. And especially across all the years of your life, I was like, I never want to pay them an extra $150 again.
Right.
Yeah.
I think two things come to mind on that. One, in the book, there is a whole piece of, I call this the entrepreneur's adventure. So for listeners who are business owners, right, oftentimes we move through this stage. We move from being an earner, where you have a paycheck and all that's taken care of, and you're really just thinking in terms of the cash that hits your account, you know, that you have to live on. And then when you start a business, you move into this non-earner phase, because traditionally, right, we're putting more money in to grow the business than maybe we're earning and able to take out of it, which is a really scary place. Mm-hmm. And we spend a lot of effort trying to get out of that section, out of that phase as quickly as possible. And then we move into the owner earner, where you're making money, you're able to pay yourself and figure that piece of it out. But it's a very different mental place to be, because you're responsible for all of it, and if you grow to the point where you have staff, then you're responsible for their paycheck. And we go through these different phases, and it changes how we look at money. Hopefully, in a good way, but sometimes you can get caught short. And I think recognizing and acknowledging that transition is important. But the other thing I was also going to say is taxes are a great example of the looking at the expense piece of it, right? You said, I don't want to have to pay $150, $150 here, $100 there. It does start to add up. And that's one piece that as a small business owner, you definitely want to, maintain, look at it regularly, look at your expenses regularly. And, if you have subscriptions that you signed up for and then you no longer use, but you forgot to get rid of the subscription, that kind of stuff can really make a difference in your money management, and therefore in the health of your business and how much you can take home.
And so many of us do try new tools and online things. Actually, just before we started, I'm just going to flash these because this was a new toy that I'm trying out because someone had it at the this conference I was at recently. If you're just listening and you can't see on YouTube, I'm holding up the Snapchat glasses. So this was something I was like, oh, let me give that a try, because they're not widely available and I could get a pair. So I got some, and now I'm struggling to pair them with my iPhone 7. And I looked on the package and it said iPhone 6. And I was like, oh, I guess I didn't read the fine print closely enough. So now I have these somewhat expensive sunglasses that have a camera built in, which is really cool. And now I'm like, am I going to be able to make this work, or do I need to return it, or do I sell it? What do I do with these? Because I did get them at a, much discounted over what they go for retail at the place. But that just made me think of all these things we try out thinking like, oh, this will be really cool. I love doing this with my business. And maybe not, especially those social media tools. We all try so many social media tools because we're like,
right.
It takes, there's such rabbit holes. It takes so much time. The schedulers, the things that shorten our links, the things that make it easier to just share straight from here, the highlight to tweet, I've tried a lot of these different things, and now and then I do try to sit down with my VA and I go through and are like, okay, are we actually using, we're using the scheduler, we're using the newsletter. Are we actually using this like social thing, this social quant thing, or this Twitter, thing that makes it easier to tweet? How much traffic and revenue am I actually getting from Twitter? Is it worth paying $15 or $25 a month for this thing to help my Twitter grow, right?
Right.
Yeah. So there's a lot of that for sure. But, I think it's good to, after I had that experience of paying that fee, I started having at least a telephone check-in with my CPA every quarter, because I also felt like I don't want to pay quarterly estimated taxes based on last year if I am making significantly more this year, or even if I have a quarter where I make significantly less. Like my husband's from overseas. We usually take at least a 2-week trip at some point to see his family. That's usually a low earning month for me. So that quarter might be less than other quarters of the year. And I'd rather not overpay taxes if I can help it, as well as not want to underpay and not have enough saved. So I don't know. Do you talk to entrepreneurs about doing stuff like that, like figuring the real tax instead of just estimating it?
I do. And as I said, I work with, I have a few accountants that I like to work with my clients if that's what our relationship is. And so I get lots of good tricks and treats from them. And it really depends on where people are at. Some people want to just have it set and forget, but it is always good to check in, especially if you have fluctuating income, because like you said, if you don't have the cash, it can be hard to make that quarterly payment if you're doing a static number. And it also, but the worst part is if you're making a lot more, you don't want to get caught short and just assume, because then you can end up with penalties too, because when you fill out those forms, you are supposed to be doing it based on your actual revenue for that quarter. And so if you just use a standard, most of the time it's okay. But if you're really up, it can make a big difference. And so that way you're not caught short later on too, of having to come up with a lot more in taxes just to close everything out that you weren't expecting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the Zen part of all of this, and I know before we hit record too, I asked you what Stratera meant, the Stratera Business Solutions, and you said that it was balance, right? That the root word has to do with balance. So tell us some of that side of your business. So we have the money, we have sort of nuts and bolts, strategic, looking at real numbers, and then how does Zen and balance work into it?
For me, it's about, a lot of people that I've talked with over the years are really intimidated, frustrated, feeling really out of balance with their money. So, I work with people who really not only, just want the black and white, but really want to feel better about their relationship with money as well. And so for me, the balance is about, well, one, it's a play on, balance sheet and balance within your finances. You actually want everything to come out right to zero numerically. But it's also about feeling good about your finances and really through understanding, knowledge, learning, getting a good handle on what's happening, being really confident in your decisions. And that is a really great feeling once you can achieve it. So I really enjoy helping people get over that hurdle of, I don't know what to do, this is a little overwhelming, to I now have the tools I need to make these decisions. This isn't taking up so much brain space and negative energy because I didn't know what to do, but I didn't want to deal with it. Once that's all gone, you have all of this other time and space in your head to focus on the things that you really love doing. So that's the other piece of it.
Mm-hmm. That's good. I like that. Yeah. So the Zen part of it too. Are you yourself Buddhist, do yoga? Is there something more to it? Zen?
This is my personal story time.
Personal story time. Yeah, I always like personal story time.
So my background is in, we were talking about this a little earlier, my background is in professional service business manager. So I'm coming off, before I started this business, I spent about a decade as business manager and CFO and partner for a civil and structural engineering firm, which is, the same concept as the people that I work with now. We sell our brains for a living, right? We don't have a storefront. There aren't any widgets that we're manufacturing. We sell our time. And so that is a business model that I know very well. And that was a great experience for me. I had my MBA paid for. I was invited into ownership. I was, the only woman on our leadership partner team. But I got sick a few years ago with what we now know as chronic Lyme disease. And when that happened, when I finally got the diagnosis 3.5 years in, it became clear that I kind of needed to make a change. And I wasn't going to be able to, I needed something that I could be more flexible with. And part of that process of healing involved kind of going down the rabbit hole into using diet and exercise and yoga and meditation to heal my body. And so I went from a very analytical world to something that's a little more open and focused on the Zen.
That is, I did not know that. That's a very interesting story. I feel like I've talked to a few women, some on the show and some just, meeting up with them elsewhere, who have been diagnosed with chronic late stage Lyme disease after years or decades of confusion and misdiagnosis. How long were you having symptoms before you were able to figure out exactly what it was?
3.5 years or so.
Years, okay.
So it definitely puts life in perspective. And so the cool thing about it, and I'm very happy to say that I'm very much trending upward. I'm probably 90% back physically, which is a great place to be. And it's allowed me to really focus on my business and working with my clients. And in the long run, like this was actually, this whole process has been really, really good because I'm now working with people who these are the people that I need to be working with, and I'm doing work that is really fulfilling. And so despite all of the downside, I've managed to get myself to a place where I think I need to be and doing the work I need to be doing.
That is good. Well, I think for so many of us, regardless of the exact circumstances of why we need more flexibility and ability to build our work around the rest of our lives, so many of us need that. I mean, I know with having special needs kids, that was my point where I left what I thought was going to be my career trajectory. And not entirely voluntarily. I wasn't expecting to never go back to that job again. but I think it's like when I look back to the 80s and 90s, I don't know if you had this feeling about work in the 80s and 90s, because I was in high school in the 80s and in college in the 90s. And I remember this idea of like, we work 90 hours, woo, like sleep when you die and let's go. And like, we're just this feeling of the more you do and less you take care of yourself, the better, like the more successful you are. And it's so nice to feel like that is really falling by the wayside and going away. Thanks to people like Ariana Huffington with her book and Thrive Global. And I just feel like all over the place, we're finding people do not do well when they don't sleep. People are less productive the more hours they stay at work. And now that we have this, we can have these kind of conversations. We have the internet. We can work from anywhere, and we can really fit it around everything else.
It really is a beautiful way to be able to find that balance in your business, in your life, whatever it might be. I mean, I feel like that 80s expectation, is still alive and kicking in certain industries, maybe a lot of them in the corporate culture. And it really does, having been somebody who ran really hard, really fast and put 150% into my work and, built a family and had 2 children very close together and, worked on master's degree, all of that stuff, that pressure, internal and external, to succeed in that way and never, sleep when you die, had a major impact on me getting sick. And so, I know that when my daughter hits, when she's 30 and is trying to make something in her life, we're going to be having lots of conversations about what she really wants and what that looks like outside of work too. I mean, I love what I do, and I'm sure you love what you do too. And it's not to say that I, want to sit around in a hammock, eating bonbons all day, because I don't. That doesn't work for me. But being able to have some flexibility around family and health and just general personal life is super important. I'm really glad that we're at that place too, where it's more mainstream at this point.
I was actually having a conversation with someone last night, and we were talking about when women leave the workforce, especially when you don't really intend to, and either for caregiving or illness or something like that. This idea that people are like, oh, you get all this time off. Like, oh, you get to have maternity leave. And I was like, when I left work to have children, especially, like, I had no idea I'd have a high risk pregnancy and be on bed rest and like use all my time off before my daughter was even born.
Oh my goodness.
And then have a very ill child. I was like, this is harder than anything I've ever done in my life. The physical pain, the physical damage, the scarring, I was like, so many things are different. I actually think I don't know who should pay this reparation, but I would love for us to get pain, suffering, and risk of death for being mothers. Like, someone should compensate us for something, because women die every day. I think something like 86 women die worldwide in pregnancy and birth-related complications.
Yeah.
Which means a lot are not dying, but are not having a very easy time of it also. So I don't know, just the idea that it's like, oh, a vacation. Like, I had a baby, let me have vacation, right?
People do that I was just talking to a friend of mine who is a fibromyalgia coach in Tupper last night, and we had this conversation about people unintentionally, when you don't have that kind of situation in your life, you just kind of don't get it. And unfortunately, you can't get it unless you go through it. I mean, you can sort of, in theory, get it intellectually, but not really. So you get comments from people like, oh, it must be nice that you get to lay in bed all day and watch Netflix. And you're like, I would give anything to not be laying in bed all day and watching Netflix. Like, this is not a fun, Jamaican cruise. This is not what's happening right here.
Not at all. And I think it becomes most acute when women have left the workforce and then get a divorce, because that's when you really see the sacrifice that they've made of their career, because the spouse has, if the spouse has maintained their career and increased their earning potential during the time when the wife was staying home either for children or aging parent care, or whatever the situation might be, if one person leaves the workforce and the other doesn't, this person is really sacrificing a lot of future, and this person's getting to maintain it, and they are very lucky. And I mean, I know that in terms of women's equality and liberation, everything, a lot of people, I have sometimes railed against higher earning women having to pay their husbands so much maintenance. But at the same time, I'm just like, yes, there is that, but there's also, it's so much more often skewed in the opposite direction. I don't know, I've lost my point a little there, but it feels so frustrating. It feels so frustrating because I feel like I've made lots of career sacrifices by staying home. Yes, I can do some of this. And it sounds like you have too. And yes, we're doing things we're excited about, but it still is not necessarily by choice. And these are choices that men aren't quite confronted with in the same way all the time.
I'm glad you brought that up. When I first had the idea for this book, it wasn't actually this book. It was a book about, because I was not raised with a lot of great financial training. I have, very successful professional parents, but there wasn't a lot of talk about money and how to choose a career that was going to support you. I did all kinds of stuff that didn't make me any money in my 20s because I was just told to go and, study what you want in college and figure it out. It'll be fine. And there was very little money training that went in with it. So originally the book in my head was, and for women especially, right? You walk out, you step out of the workforce for even 3 years. And the long-term ramifications of not having 401k matches and putting that stuff in yourself. And, there's a reason that generally single, women by themselves, divorced or widowed or whatever, in their 60s and above are, hugely living under the poverty line, and really they're having massive end of life crises around money because back in the day, they didn't have what they needed to make sure that they were going to be covered later on. And so originally the book was like, things my mother never taught me. It was that concept of, money management is so important. And we as women, I think, tend to shy away from it, especially. We have this love-hate relationship with it, right? We want to have so much money that like we can go on cruises whenever we want and have lovely dinners and whatever, but we're not comfortable figuring out what we need to do to get to that point in some cases, or we just tend to not feel really confident in terms of how we're using it. So that ended up translating into, the business piece of it, because the same emotional response crops up for us as women business owners.
Mm-hmm. Well, maybe that's your next book.
Maybe
follow up. I think that
or how to build a business with a chronic illness, or who knows, all kinds of opportunities.
That's true. Have you read? Let's see. Okay, it's almost like the feminist text, which was The Feminine Mystique. It's The Feminine Mistake. Have you read The Feminine Mistake?
No.
It's a really good book. You should read it. I've mentioned it a few times on the show. I read it. Amanda Steinberg recommended it on some Daily Worth post, and I went and read it, and it was, so there's 3 generations in the book. There's the grandmother, the mother, and the daughter. And the mother gives the feminine mystique to the daughter, who is the author of The Feminine Mistake, and basically tells her the feminine mistake is giving up work. Basically, it's giving up your future earning potential. All the things we just talked about. Like when you're out of the workforce, you're not contributing to 401ks. You're not getting new positions. You're not getting the networking. You're not meeting the boss at the company you should be working at. You're missing. There are all kinds of opportunity costs that are going into this besides just straight up earning, and also just even like not paying into Social Security for those years. Like your eventual benefits are much reduced. So, and the book was looking at the grandmother who did go to college and married well, but never went into the workforce. So when her husband left her for his secretary, she did end up, even though she was from a relatively well-off family, she ended up with the mother fully supporting her. And the mother went back to work after having her kids because her husband didn't want to be saddled with her mother. So she says, I will work to support my mother, which she did, which is great. But at the same time, looking at these generations of women, just the difficulty and the fall in circumstance because of sacrificing so much when you leave the workforce for any amount of time, but especially if you don't return to it full stop. Once the mother was older, it was just like, she had no idea what to do, no idea where to start. Do I go back to college? And she didn't have any wherewithal from the divorce. She didn't have her own lawyer. There were just all these things that went into it that might be good research for your book about your mother.
Yeah. I'll check it out. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry to go on so much about that. We need to talk some more about your book here. So, because we are getting into the episode a bit. So tell us a little bit more about, as someone goes through the journey, the adventure of the book, where do they end up by the end? What kind of changes do you see them making as they work through it?
Well, hopefully if they don't put it down halfway through because it's just, steam is coming out of their ears, which I don't think is the case. By the end of it, I want my readers to feel way better about their money picture, whatever it might be. A lot of that comes from just, being able to pull up your bootstraps and look at it regularly, So the book goes through, just great best practices as a business owner for managing your money. And by the end of it, you have a good understanding of what your financials are really telling you, how you read financial statements, what does that look like for, how you can calculate how much you can take out of your business to pay yourself. All of those questions that tend to hang over people's heads, feeling like, I know I'm supposed to know something, but I don't know what it is, or am I missing something? I'm not sure. It gives a nice explanation for, when you hear people at a Chamber of Commerce dinner talking about their talking about their finances or their business or how well it's doing, it's not a language they don't understand anymore.
That sounds good. So if Sally's self-employed, currently has only personal bank accounts, and has that whole like robbing Peter to pay Paul, like I'm transferring money from my PayPal into my personal, and then, oh no, I need to pay something for my business, so I'm transferring it back into my PayPal. And PayPal is like the only real place where her self-employed income's coming in. And she has no idea what her profits are or her versus her revenues, and just kind of keeps it all floating. If she implements everything in your book, what does that situation look like by the end for her? Where is she?
I love this question. She implements all of this stuff. And this is work that I do with my clients as well. She has separated out her personal and business. Hopefully, it can be tricky when you start because there isn't a lot of money, right, for a lot of people. But, you can take even, a couple $100 and set up a business checking account. And if you haven't established yourself as an LLC or, incorporated or created an official business entity, sometimes it can be hard to get a business checking account, but you can just open another checking account that you just use to manage your business finances. And we had talked about, what are some of the good takeaways for people listening to this. And that's number one, is get your business and your personal monies untangled.
Okay.
Because it makes it really hard, as you mentioned, to know where you stand when everything is all combined. And as a business, you are required to keep accurate financial records for your business. And that can be really hard to do when you've got Amazon charges and diaper bill and whatever else all in one place. So, it's hard to get a really clear picture of what's going on when it's all in one statement, or you're taking money out. So separating stuff out, she will have that taken care of. She hopefully will have moved to a true financial accounting system and it kind of doesn't matter how you do this. You can certainly manage your books on an Excel spreadsheet or even a spiral notebook, but there are lots of great programs out there now that help you really get a handle on what's happening in your business finances pretty easily once you learn how to use them.
What do you recommend? Which one?
I typically work with QuickBooks Online with my clients because it's a true accounting system. There are a lot of other platforms out there who, bill themselves as a great bookkeeping system, and they do a lot of good stuff, but they generally only give you the cash view of your business. They don't give you a balance sheet, which is your assets and liabilities. They don't offer your full financial picture, which when you're first starting out may not be where your mindset is, but as you grow, you really need those numbers to take it to the next level. So I like to get my clients, even if they're not, feeling like they're quite there yet, set up in something that they can grow with, because transferring midstream is just a pain. So I'd rather have them get really intimate with a program that they can, use for a long time going forward, instead of having to change things halfway through.
And I feel like that's often one that accountants can work with. So if you haven't hired an accountant yet, like as you move along, that'll be one that they can probably integrate really easily with.
Right. They're working on that platform as well. You can actually just invite them in and then they have access to everything that's happening. And I want to take a second here to talk about this because a lot of people don't necessarily, there's a lot of confusion about the difference between what's a bookkeeper and what's an accountant and what's a CPA mean and all of that stuff. And, you know, the sort of Wikipedia definition is a bookkeeper is somebody who's responsible for the day-to-day data entry of financial transactions into your business's accounting system. For a lot of us, we are our own bookkeeper, and there are a lot of great platforms out there that help streamline that process so you don't have to do a lot of data entry. But some people grow to a point where they outsource that to somebody else. But then an accountant is somebody who takes that information and does higher level analysis on it. For a lot of us as small business owners, our accountant relationship is really just for tax purposes. But in theory, they should also be able to help you make some strategic decisions. The work I do with my clients kind of bridges that gap. I sort of do everything or help them learn how to do everything except taxes because I'm not a CPA, which is a certified public accountant, and they typically do that higher level and file taxes. And, it kind of depends on their relationship with their clients. Different CPAs do different things, but for the small business owner, it can be a little bit overwhelming trying to figure out who do I need to work with? Who should I hire? What do I need anybody? Maybe not, so it's good to understand those definitions, I think.
Yeah. And I did want to point out too, because I've tried a few of the different platforms like Wave and Xero and stuff, because I wanted to be able to recommend them to people who are purely service-based and just needed invoicing systems and something to track. But because we've always had businesses with inventory, with physical inventory, both with our record label and our cattle ranch, things that go in and out and we need to track, and we have depreciation schedules and stuff. I really couldn't do it with any of those smaller companies. So if you are someone who has a physical business with inventory, I totally would recommend just going straight in with QuickBooks as well, because it's trying to shift that information from one platform to another is a nightmare.
Right. And I'm glad you brought that up because those platforms are good, and they do market themselves as, you sell your time, so all you need is cash in and cash out. But the reality is, even as a professional service provider or a coach or a creative professional, there's a whole other part of your business that's equally important, even if you're not carrying inventory. And the reality is, from a tax standpoint, if you buy a $2,000 computer, that probably shouldn't be a direct expense. Right. You should probably depreciate that. And we don't need to get into all of those technical definitions here. But so that's why with my clients, like I want them set up so that they can work in a way that, like I said, is going to grow with them, but also so they understand the full financial, picture, definitions, all of that stuff that some of those middle ground platforms don't give you. They don't give you everything.
And, even if you're not keeping inventory, it is really good to be able to track things like cost of acquisition. Like we have cost of goods sold for our physical things, but a lot of people I know, it's hard for them to, we hear about like, what are your conversion numbers for Facebook ads, stuff like that. And I think that's as close as a lot of people get, but as you grow and continue your business, it is good to know how much it costs you to acquire each new client, what their value is over the lifetime of your relationship. Things like that are hard to pull out of these like straight up just invoice, cash in, cash out things.
Not only that, most people don't have a sense of how much equity they've put in to build the business, and that isn't recognized in a lot of those programs as well. So, it's I have no idea whether I spent $5 last year or $50,000 last year to and that can leave people with a big unknown feeling, right? It's not the full picture. And that's a really important part as a business owner to know, is your business, not only is there cash coming in, but, are you using it appropriately? Is the equity ratio making sense for you and getting you where you want to be? And you can't do that if you don't have the whole picture.
Okay, great. So we've got separate your accounts, get a system like QuickBooks, something similar. Any other tips? Go straight.
Yeah. And the biggest thing I think is look at it regularly. This is a really good starting point. I recommend that my clients set aside some time once a week to do bookkeeping type stuff. And once you get set up on platforms, you can really, like 15 minutes, half an hour, maybe an hour at the end of the month when you're reconciling your bank accounts or something. if you do that regularly, you really get a good sense of how money's coming in, where it's going out. You know, you can start to figure out any cash flow bumps that you have that are hard to do if you're not looking at it at all, or you're only looking at it sporadically. So that's a really good starting point. It's just, you may really hate doing it at the beginning, but, you know, sitting down and spend half an hour looking at your cash balances and making sure that you don't need to chase somebody down to pay you, that you're not leaving money on the table somewhere. You know, all of those things can really strengthen your business and make you feel a lot better about your financial situation.
Mm-hmm. And I think doing all of those things, especially when you were mentioning about separating out the accounts, before that you were talking about when people come up to tax time and they have to spend days tracking down receipts and finding things and like going into different credit card accounts and being like, oh, I paid for travel, that should have been business. And when you have the separate accounts, it's all, you can just go back through all the statements and it's all there, right?
Mm-hmm.
That
yeah,
would save a lot of time.
And if you spend a little time on a weekly basis going through, okay, I have these 6 receipts from stuff that I spent this week, and, you know, categorizing them, saving them wherever you save your you know, records, because obviously we're legally bound to keep a record of our financial transactions for a certain amount of time. And
this is mine.
Jen has a. We're going to talk about how you can offline. We're going to talk about how you can make that an electronic thing, which might be interesting for you. There are all kinds of great tools these days.
Well, that's kind of a leftover from our ranch too, because a lot of times, like our horse shoer would sign me a little paper receipt every.
Love it.
Yeah, I'd have to actually write him checks, but I'm no longer.
Which we don't do anymore. Nobody writes checks anymore. It's the receipt thing is definitely tricky for us these days, right? Especially when we're working in an online environment, because maybe 10% is a paper receipt, and then the other 90 is some mix of, you know, emailed receipts or Amazon that you'd have to go on and download, or your, you know, phone bill statement that maybe shows up electronically or only when you go in and find it, you know. So how do you bring all those in one place? And most of the time we kind of just let it sit there, but it just makes finding it again really onerous. Like if you need that 3 years from now, it's a pain to go back and find it. So keeping track of that a little more cohesively, your future self will definitely thank you for it. And I go through some options and thoughts about that in the book as well, because the record management is a part that many of us don't do very well with too.
Yeah, well, maybe okay. I'm asking this as a question because I have over here an area of files. I do print everything out so that at the end of the year, I take my, you know, bunch of manila envelopes, put a big rubber band around them, and I'm like, here are all the receipts for 2016. So even the ones that are electronic, I go ahead and print them, knowing that within the next 6 years, if I get audited, I just hand them this big bundle, rather than me trying to like electronically go find things. But maybe you have a much better, I'm sure there are much better ways of doing it than printing it all out in paper, right?
Well, definitely will save some more trees. But I like the fact that you're getting everything in one place, right? So in the going paperless world, back in the day, in a previous life, you know, we were always trying to figure out, previous work life, I should say, we were always trying to figure out like how much can we keep, what do we have to keep paper, what can we do electronically? And for a while we were doing a mirroring, right? So if we have, so you don't have part of it in electronic and part of it in paper, and you're not sure which, and you just spend all this time trying to figure out, oh wait, is that printed in the file or is it saved on the, you know, server somewhere over here? So the idea is whatever you have in paper should also exist in electronic, or vice versa. And with scanning and stuff like that these days, you can do that. But with financial receipts, these days, you really don't need much in terms of paper copy anymore. So I'm a big fan of getting everything scanned into one location. There's one particular program that I work with my clients with. There are lots out there that are equally good. I just happen to have gotten turned on to this one, and it works well. And I like it because it integrates with QuickBooks Online automatically. So it really minimizes your amount of data entry that you have to do. But it's called HubDoc. There's another one called, I think, Bank Receipt and File Bank might be another one. But
I've tried Shoebox before, where you scan it and it's supposed to pick up the numbers.
Yeah, so HubDoc does the same thing. It's OCR, so it recognizes or attempts to recognize some of this stuff. But it's cool because there are about 4 different ways you can get that information in. So if you have a paper receipt and you're traveling, there's an app on your phone. You can just snap a picture and it uploads into the system, and you can get rid of the receipt. If you get emailed a receipt, you can forward it to HubDoc and it'll suck it in and it's good. You can drag and drop from your desktop. Like, there are all these great programs out there that do wonderful things this way, so you could get all your receipts into an electronic format and pretty real-time, easy way to do it. But the biggest thing for record management is what would make your future self happy, right? It's not even about the entry and figuring out how to file it now. It's about how easy is it going to be to retrieve it later. Mm-hmm. So that's where getting it all in one place and categorized and like tagged in some kind of way or in a certain folder or whatever, so you know what it is and it doesn't take a lot of time to find it later on.
Yeah, mine would probably be annoying because I'd have to open all the, but I do it like, here's our itemized medical deductions as one folder, like one business, another one. So I would have to like rifle through them all. But you know what did it? It was a Seinfeld episode. There was a Seinfeld episode where George was dating an accountant and Seinfeld was being audited, and he had his shoebox of real receipts, and when George like broke up with her or something, she threw them into the river, and he was like, still being audited, still trying to figure it out. He was trying to find this receipt for a computer from 3 years ago or something. Right. And then when he asks her, well, what are we going to do now? She's like, oh, well, just give me your copies. And he's like, I don't have copies. So ever since then, I've just been like, protection of the original receipt and my bundle. Like when you said, oh, then you just throw the receipt away, I was like, throw the receipt away? I can't. The real receipt, So, but I'm going to go through this and I'm going to try it because I think I am still stuck in the 90s, early 2000s of trying to keep paper receipts, and it would make my office a much nicer place to live in with, remember that dream of paperless office? It still hasn't happened, has it?
It's a myth.
Jetpacks.
It's a myth because it's hard to get away from it 100%. You can, there's a lot. I'm surprised at how little I use now, but it's definitely, I don't think we'll ever be 100% paperless. But the other thing I want to say about that is, that's not for everybody, right? Going completely 100% into the cloud is not always what everyone wants to do. The biggest takeaway is, be consistent with it and try to think about how you save stuff so that you're going to remember where it's going to be, when you need to go and find it.
Which is why I do this. So I have my filing cabinets on either side here where I file everything, but anything that I'll need for taxes, I have my little...
Love it.
Yeah, there's my HSA. Here's costs for one thing. We have service dogs, so I have my service dog expenses separately because that's separate from our other pets. And and our record label, and then my online business. And just... there's not a lot, as you can see, but it's just, month by month. We're in the second quarter now, so I do it quarterly. At the end of the quarter, I try to take it out and look at my real quarterly estimated, and then bundle that, and then the next quarter. And then at the end of the year, I bundle them all together, my 4 quarters.
We're on top of it. I love it. That's great.
Well, that part of it, at least. What gets harder is I also have stacking trays over here of stuff that is not financial, but needs to be filed and taken care of. That's where I fall behind, because I'm like, oh, it's not really money stuff. I'll get to it.
So it doesn't matter. Well, the cool thing about, we'll talk about this more offline, but the cool thing about a lot of these online, storage, data management, storage type programs are that they have bank level security, and, it doesn't take up a lot of space to scan a document, right? So you can put anything in there. It doesn't have to only be financial, you can keep contracts in there. You can keep health records in there if you wanted to, as long as you were clear about what was business and what was personal and all of that kind of stuff. So there are other options out there too for all that other stuff that isn't specific to a receipt, for example.
A lot of it's my kids' medical and educational stuff, all the IEPs, all the testing, all
kinds of stuff. Yeah.
From being away for a bit, I haven't gotten to that pile in a while, and I'm just like, oh man, I have to really file. But
you feel like you do before tax season, right? Oh man, I gotta look through all that stuff.
Yeah. So, but that's great. So, okay, so we've got our anything you want to add to the tips before we go? Because when we do our show notes, we'll bullet your tips out.
Yeah. Well, okay. I have one other tip that comes up a lot when I talk with people, which is take a look at, as a business owner, take a look at what your initial onboarding / contract to getting cash in hand flow is. Because a lot of times that might be an area where, one, we take a lot of time, so it pushes out how fast we can get paid. But it's also a great opportunity to develop an excellent client relationship. I don't know if you've ever been in the position where you've talked with somebody, you've agreed to work with them, you're all excited, and then a contract shows up and it just puts this like, that's not what I thought, or it's super legalese, or it's just somehow a little bit disconnected. Your contract, your invoices, your receipts, like all of that written stuff involving your finance or, your services with people, can be part of your client communication. And the better you are at that, the more they're going to love working with you and be great as a referral, person, or, a continued client and stuff like that. So there are places in that very nitty gritty, not super fun part of your business, like contracts, which most of us would rather just work without them, but we can't, living in the world that we live in. But that actually can be a great positive opportunity to make sure you're on the same page with your client, make sure that everybody's feeling great about what's happening, establish your boundaries, all of that stuff in a way that doesn't put your client off. And that can make it easier for you to get paid faster, and all of that good stuff, which is obviously our point. Where the point is to try and turn your work into cash as fast as possible so that you can use it to live on and grow your business and stuff.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point. I like that idea, because it's true. Sometimes the contracts that arrive for something, you're just like, oh, how much of this do I have to read? I'm scrolling. There's all these terms and conditions, and okay, let me circle that bit. That sounds important.
What am I agreeing to? That's not what we talked about. Whatever it might be.
Or like, this looks like such a standard, download off the internet, non-personalized.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's true. Mm-hmm. I've never thought about how much that might give me pause in that onboarding process as a client of somebody.
And you might still hit yes, but you might not have an awesome, warm feeling about the work you're going to do. It might just give you a little bit of a pause, and as a business owner, I want my clients to feel awesome about working with me. And I really want to do everything I can to not have them have those moments of, I'm not feeling great about what's happening here, or I'm not sure what she means by that, or whatever it might be. So oftentimes we don't think about that piece of it, but it can make a big difference in how your clients perceive you and the work you're doing together.
So do you help people rewrite their contracts?
My politically correct answer is I'm not a lawyer. That being said, I do have a lot of experience writing contracts. In previous lives, I spent much of my time writing contracts, so I'm very familiar with that language. So I certainly have these conversations with my clients. We look at what they have on hand, and then I have connections with, attorneys who I can pass things by and make sure that we get the official sign off on language if we need to.
Okay, because I know a lot of people that I know have bought packages of contracts and stuff from people for service providers.
Mm-hmm. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's better than having nothing, for sure.
And so can people just go in and change the language of those?
You can. It's not a great idea to do it without some counsel, because you may be stripping out a term, or you may be stripping out something that you really need. You may be changing language that to you sounds like this means the same thing, but from a legal standpoint is completely different, so you might be taking on liability or something like that. And that's stuff that you really just start to understand the more you work with it. But there are, I'm not a big fan of stripping out just for the sake of stripping out until you're comfortable with what you're doing, obviously.
So at the same time, I hate 28-page sales pages, and I hate 28-page terms and conditions. I'm just like, are you kidding me? Like, the
reality is what if you're a solopreneur, you don't there's no reason you need a 28-page contract, right?
Or sales page. I'm sorry.
You don't. Right. I think my contract it's a kind of a letter agreement format where it's not just straight into the legalese. It's here's what we talked about doing. Here's what I'm proposing for scope of services and fee and all this stuff, but in very kind of just normal language. And then I think I have like a page and a half of terms and conditions. Okay. That could get down to a page. I mean, it's totally possible to cover yourself as a small business owner without needing all of that stuff. Mm-hmm. But talking with somebody who is more experienced with that, obviously is an important thing to do too. I wouldn't feel, before I got into this work and had the experience that I've had and talked with the professionals that I've talked with, I certainly wouldn't have been at all comfortable going and just being, well, I think I need that clause, but I don't think I need that clause. And knowing where to strip that down can certainly be tricky.
And I know that being a special needs mom myself, I have had so many times where I have had to be the one saying, you know, I just got a call from the school. I have to take my daughter to the hospital. Can we reschedule? You know, like, even though I know this is an hour from when we're scheduled, like, there've been so many times where I've been the one having to reschedule something last minute because I do have kind of extreme situations. So I always shy away from things that are like, you have to reschedule within 24 hours or you forfeit this, or, you know, that kind of thing. Because if you have a chronic condition, an illness, you know, a parent with chronic condition, you know, there's so many ways and reasons that I want to be flexible on those things. So I've tended not to have any of those things written into anything I do.
You know what I would say to that? I would counter that with I would rather see it written in your contract.
Yeah.
In a way that allows you to have that as a standard. And then the thing is, you can write it in your contract and then say, this is what the contract says, but for you, client X, I'm going to change the terms a little bit because we've agreed with that and I can do that. But at least then you have a baseline and you're covered, and you're not, I'm flipping this conversation around a little bit more to the opposite side, right? Like you needing to not have your clients be super flexible with you, but it works, it can totally work both ways. And I'd rather see you have a contract that covers you more and is more finalized. And then if you on an individual basis need to tweak it, you can tweak it, but at least you have that standard, and then you also don't have to rewrite your terms and conditions all the time.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, to talk to you about these things actually, because to be honest, I've moved away from one-on-one work in the last year. I told you, you know, with us selling our ranch and everything, and I'm just starting back into it again. And I was like, oh yeah, where did that contract go? I did have one.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Well, fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing all of this stuff with us. I am really excited to go read your book and leave a review and try some of these things out myself, because I am always learning, especially filing and record keeping is something that I get overwhelmed by. I love after tax, you know, after the end of the year when I put everything together. I usually have a shredding party, which I haven't yet this year because I was still waiting on some documents from selling the ranch, and I ended up filing for an extension, which I almost never do. But I haven't done my shredding party yet, and I can feel it in my office. My office just feels full of stuff.
Ready to clean out.
Yeah. So
that's awesome.
I'm feeling the need to do that. And maybe I will go through your book and then work that into my shredding party and get rid of it.
I love it. Perfect. Yeah. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm super excited the book's out today.
Yay! So everyone go download it today.
So it's free today from Amazon. Actually, it'll be free for the next 5 days, but get it today because why not? Get started.
It'll be good to get the first day download numbers. And if you're able to at least read a good bit of it and go leave a review as soon as possible too, because that always, we gotta support our authors here that we have on the show. So that always helps, getting the day one downloads, reviews. I'm gonna go do it. We're gonna get ready. So hopefully you'll get a boost from us, from our audience here.
Thank you, Jen. I appreciate the opportunity. It was super fun to talk to you. We're definitely gonna have to talk more offline.
Yeah, we will. And also, I know you mentioned that you do have a freebie. The book is obviously the main freebie today. If you guys want to take a look at the Zen Calculator, which is a free tool on the Stratera Business website, we'll put a link to that too, so you can go check out the calculator. I love calculators.
It's a fun, easy way that you can look at your top 5 money-making numbers and play around with them to see, like, okay, if I make this much and I have this much in expenses, what do I have left over to play with to put back into my business? If I have set aside a certain amount for taxes, what do I have left to take home? So it's a really safe place to mess around with your numbers a little and start to feel more comfortable thinking through your income flow and things like that.
Fantastic. We'll definitely put the link to that too. So thank you again for coming and joining us. I will talk to you soon.
Great. Thanks, Jen.
Bye.